did a great job of having us think about some of the ways that friendship and communication can be challenging, getting stuck in the same patterns of communication or feeling a little stuck in a rut, having difficulties with making new friends and apprehension that we experience, and then some of the ways that things such as gender and culture impact our friendships too. So I think this is a really great way for you to think about some of these ideas, and you can use some of the elements from this discussion leading as well as your notes as a way to help you in preparing for the use of friendships. So in the remaining time, I do want to talk a little bit about a debrief of the essay, hit on a couple additional points regarding friendship, and help to prepare you as we get ready for the rest of the week. So some things that I noticed that worked really well in your essays. First of all, I really liked that in your interpersonal analysis essay, you had good introduction and conclusion paragraphs. Again, I really liked, in this essay, I'll be exploring nonverbal communication, the use of relationships, and attachment styles. So I liked the way that there were clear previews and reviews of major ideas. Continue to work on that because it helps readers understand overall flow of your essay. I think overall, the use of citations was pretty good. Most folks in the class were citing both from the book as well as from the TV show episode or film. So I was impressed by the works cited list. I thought that people were using in-text citations overall in an appropriate way. If there were some issues with citations, I did include some notes there. And I think you all did a good job of identifying some core concepts and ideas. There were a lot of papers that looked at issues such as social penetration theory, assertive abduction theory, nonverbal communication, intrapersonal communication, and so on. And I really appreciated that you were able to identify some core concepts that made sense and that were really clear in the show or episode that you focused on. Some things to keep working on and some general trends that I noticed. So one of the things to keep working on is making sure that you're explaining the link between the concepts from the course and the application into the episode, or for your final essay, the conversation. So one paragraph style to avoid is defining a term or concept, showing us an episode or example of that, and then having like one sentence that brings those two things together. So for instance, if you're talking about nonverbal communication, show us examples, show us ways that nonverbal communication is functioning in the relationship. There's only a sentence or two that's dedicated to the actual application or explanation, then the analysis ended up being a little underdeveloped. One way to help, especially if you're running low on time and space in your essay, so maybe you need to fill out the 4 pages and you're running a little bit short, is to think about a little bit deeper into the core concepts of the course. So for instance, not only does nonverbal communication happen, but what are some of the functions? We talked about how it can be used for complementing, substituting, contradicting. How might those functions be present in that conversation? So I encourage you to dig a little bit more into some of the details about the terms or concepts or ideas. Social penetration theory has, our kind of periphery, intermediate, and central layers. How are these different layers at play in the relationship? Keep working on some convention and grammar fixes. Again, I really recommend the 24 or 48-hour method, where you give yourself time away, you look at a clean draft before you turn it in. One thing I noticed a lot was the use of you or we. So those types of second-person pronouns are a good idea to avoid in an essay like this one. You could use a first person, I, or third person, right? The essay argues, but second person implies there's like a person reading. You don't really know who that person is. The second person isn't the best choice for this essay, but I encourage you to keep working on some of that polish in the future, including capitalization of proper nouns and so on. The Writing Center is a great resource if you need some additional help, and I'm also happy to look over drafts and outlines too. So we've gone over a lot of the elements of this final essay in the course. Remember, it's due December 16th by 11:59 p.m. Like your analysis essay, it's 4 pages, double-spaced. In addition to that, I'd like the transcription of your conversation and then a works cited page, right? So the transcription does not count toward the 4 pages. It's 4 pages of content in addition to the transcription and works cited. We've kind of talked about a lot of this already, but this is asking you to look at a conversation between you and somebody else. It could be a close friend or family member. It could be over the phone or using Zoom or Skype and so on. Just make sure that it's recorded, and just make sure that you have consent from the person and that they know ahead of time that they're being recorded for this conversation. So you'll reflect on what you've learned about the ways that you're speaking and listening and content in the course. So you might think about some of the dynamics of friendships, such as gender and culture. How are those at play in your conversation? What are the things you talk about? What are the ways that your friendship plays out? Is it more based on activities, or is it more based on conversation? That would be an example of using some of the things we've talked about for today for that essay. I've also included the rubric on the front page of Canvas that you can access to. That again goes over the things they'll be using to grade the assignment. Some ways to prepare, right? You might start by thinking about a person or situation that's important to you, that agrees to and talks with you about this. It could be about a lot of different things. You might think about topics that fit within the intermediate or central layers of social penetration theory. So what's somebody that you're comfortable talking to about your ideas, your fears, your concerns, and so on. Transcribe, so use the direct dialogue between the two people to kind of make sense. And as you do that, you'll notice a lot of things stand out to you in your conversations. Pick 2 to 3 relevant concepts from the back half of the quarter. So we've talked about relationships before the break. We're talking about friendships for today. Family communication, mediated communication, or the dark side of communication, as we'll get to next week, are all fair game. And then using that information, you can start to organize and put some of those elements together. So I've had an example here about transcription, right? Transcription, it's a little bit small to see here, but a little bit easier if you see the slide after class. Would include somebody's name, and then it would include direct things that they said within that conversation. So an easy way to do this is to alternate between people and what that person has to say. Try to get that word for word rather than paraphrasing, because getting the exact conversation will give you a lot more to go off of. So if you say the word a lot, that's okay. That tells you a lot about maybe your apprehension or your use of filler sentences as a way to frame your conversation. Transcription takes time. At best, you should plan on essentially double the time as the content itself, because oftentimes you're pausing or you're listening to a slower version of the recording in order to transcribe and follow it along. Like with previous assignments, you can email me your drafts or outlines, set up a schedule to complete the assignment on time. So for instance, by next Monday, I'll create an outline. By next Friday, I'll create contact with the person, and so on. It's okay if the conversation takes longer or goes beyond that 15 or so minute window. You can pick a snippet of that conversation that especially stands out to you. And again, all these slides will be available after class to help you as you're planning and preparing, and we'll use more time this week to help with brainstorming and putting these ideas together. So there's a lot of good content related to friendship and communication in the discussion leading, and I think it did a great job of covering some of these ideas. Right, as we've talked about, friendships are voluntary. They involve this kind of relationship between other people. The idea that it's personal, that it's focused on equality and benefit for both people, and that it's something you experience affectively. Somebody's a good friend, or some important ideas to continue to develop. The discussion group already did a great job of identifying some of the dialectics and challenges. Remember, dialectics are these issues between extremes that we've talked about a little bit more earlier in the quarter, but are listed here so that you can refer back to those later. The discussion group did a great job of going through these different friendship stages as well, right? From top to bottom, these friendships kind of emerge and develop over time, but as we notice in relationship stages, they can also come apart too and deal with some challenges. Again, this visual is from your book, and I think the discussion group did a good job of going over some of the different types of friendships and the challenges that different friendships encounter. And if you've ever seen, right, the Justin Timberlake, Mila Kunis film, Friends with Benefits, right, it's an emerging trend to have friendships where you're not necessarily in a relationship, but you're maybe sexually or romantically involved, right? That points to some of the challenges that we see in a lot of modern and contemporary friendships. What role do things like sexuality and sexual attraction play? What are the agreements in the relationship? We've looked at COVID-19 and the challenges of using technology. We might also continue to think about how other people view a friendship, like, oh, they're in love when they're just friends. So these are some questions to continue to think about, or maybe to explore for your own essay. I know we kind of went through these ideas quickly, but I do think the discussion group did a great job of covering them. We'll review some of these ideas on Wednesday's class. But as a reminder, please prepare for this essay on December 16th and continue to think about the ways that friendship relationships can impact your life. For next class, we have another reading to work on that will look more at the role of family relationships. Go ahead and pass forward your activity for today. Welcome back. I hope that you have a good and safe couple weeks as we gear up toward the end of the quarter. Thank you all for coming back, and I look forward to seeing you again on Wednesday.